These are scary times, Bruce. It's just random violence.
The war goes on.
I will tear him limb from limb!
He's in his prime. He'll kill you.
I will show you who rules Gotham City!
I'm not finished yet.
And if we keep doing this sort of thing, I'm going to have to change the name of the show to Remote Viewing and Friends.
So what's the deal? Brian can't... He's too good for the Batman?
Well, I don't think Brian got copies of the Batman, and it doesn't always balance out that way. And this is one of those titles that so many people have been bugging me. I mean, we're 2 weeks late reviewing this, and this is partially their fault because they never sent me the first one, despite much badgering, and then the copy and then partially my fault because the copy I ordered, I got used instead of new, and it took the full 14 days to show up.
Oh man,
yeah, I fucking hate that. So, God damn it, just put it in the mailbox. How hard is that?
It is weird how that is because a lot of times I order stuff used, and it shows up like the minute I've hit send. The doorbell rings and it's right there.
But regardless,
yes,
this is Leon coming in to join us for this review of long overdue review from the DC animated universe of Batman: The Dark Knight Returns. Now, of course, this two-part thing they put out in part 1 and part 2, which is pretty greedy considering each one is like an hour and 15 minutes long.
I go so far as to call it bullshit, but okay.
Right. No, it is. Look, make no mistake, it's pure greed and nothing but.
Actually, I think there's another reason for it, but go ahead.
Okay, well, you can explain that in a moment. But it's adapted from Frank Miller's
highly acclaimed.
Yeah, highly acclaimed, completely iconic, completely comic universe, both within the world of comics and out, like inside the own fictional world and outside in our real world, changing novel. I mean, Batman: The Dark Knight Returns was not only for many people their intro into like comics, like for adults or comics at all.
Yeah.
But it was probably, I would say for most people I know, it was their major introduction to Batman, period.
Well, it was the introduction to what we think of as Batman now. And while Batman had been like, for everybody, the majority of people, even comic book fans, Batman had been the Adam West Batman for so long. You thought of Batman, that's what you thought of. Bat gadgets, puns, biff bam, onomatopoeia, the whole thing. And even though Batman in comics changed, mostly due to guys like Steve Englehart and Archie Goodwin, and artists like Neil Adams, who brought a more realistic look to it, that wasn't the public perception. Public perception was Adam West or cartoons. And it wasn't until Frank Miller took this and did The Dark Knight Returns where we got the gritty Batman, with the Batman that was everything, being all that he could be.
And even more so than just, in terms of the art and the changes in there, I think that the story really was, the idea of showing Batman and Superman and Catwoman and all these characters as, elderly in a dystopian but realistically so future. And now what happens when the old ways just aren't cutting it anymore? What happens when Superman is basically just working for Washington, D.C. at that point and doing whatever he's told
being
a soldier?
A government stooge.
Yeah,
which that's sort of the Batman perspective and the Frank Miller perspective. From Superman's perspective, hey man, he's being a good citizen. He has his power. He believes in his government.
But he's still the big Boy Scout, as they always refer to him, which is to say, wow, you're incredibly naive.
Yes.
Like, to say that, like, just because the president told you to do something, that it's coming from a good place.
Yes. And this was also, it's, usually when you say something is a product of its time, it makes it sound like, well, it worked then and it doesn't work any other time. This is that exception where it's very much steeped in the Reagan era 80s. It's like, I think 84, around that time when it came out. But all of you read it now, it still fits. It's, it's not like you go like, because it's, it's a future story, and it's almost like it extrapolates on what New York would have been like had Mayor Giuliani not got elected and cleaned the whole city up.
Well, it's funny. A friend of ours criticizes this book, saying that, like, I don't understand why anybody likes this. Batman and Superman, this is not who those characters are. I'm like, you do understand they're like 70 here, right?
Right.
This is them changing after decades and decades of seeing things. This shit just not work. I mean, especially, like, I think the real portrait of that is the relationship between Batman and the Joker. And Frank Miller was the first one to really delineate them as being impossible to live without one another.
Yes.
Like, it's almost a real relationship that they have in its own way, that one created the other. And like Batman's like coming back out. Like here, he's not gay. He's been retired for a while because he's like, well, I'm too old for this. There's some other people out there, but crime has just gotten so out of control. There's street gangs all over the place. He's old and starting to, I don't know. I mean, like it's like the drinking and playing Bruce Wayne for real has taken its toll on him. The guilt is coming back, and quite frankly, he's starting to lose his mind a little bit. Yes,
that's right. When it starts, he's having these sort of psychotic breaks where he's doing things like, he looks up and goes like, wait, when did I shave off my mustache?
I find absolutely nothing in this book seems outside of what I would believe Batman could do, considering the Batman, the Batman, the Batman universe. I don't see anything in here that's there, nor do I see stuff that seems outside of the realm of Superman either.
Right.
I mean, especially, like I said, this doesn't happen tomorrow. This happens many tomorrows from now, with much changing. It's a world where the government decided there can't be any more superheroes.
Which is realistic, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why no end of books have discussed this, have had this happen in them, It's not uncommon at all, because you're like, oh, well, that would be what would almost certainly happen. It's a gun control story, basically.
That's true.
Like at least it has been more so in like the civil. What was it? It's not
Civil War.
Yeah, Civil War.
Yeah.
That Marvel did. But Batman basically decides, okay, well, I'm going to come back out and start doing this again. And the city has, a lot of this is news reports. Like, oh, this, like, some people, citizens are like, oh, yes, it's great to have Batman back. And others are like, he's a vigilante, he's a terrorist. There's no place, and there's a valid argument for both.
Oh, absolutely.
I think Miller is the first person ever to suggest a world in which we could talk about these superheroes in this way.
Yeah.
Like, not everybody's like, yay.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, this is like, let's try and think about how regular people would react against this. And as he goes along, he starts making just as many enemies as he does new friends, as well as a young girl who becomes his new Robin, despite one of the interesting things that once again about his, he foreshadowed the death of Jason Todd.
True.
Which I don't like. It was one of those things which was a great run years later in comics with the Death in the Family, where they actually killed him, well, with quotation marks on. But like in here, it's like, they go, well, you remember what happened to Jason. That's why you quit being Batman.
You know what? I would say that this book, it hurried along the demise of Jason. Because when it came along with a vote, there's a lot of people who went like, you know what? If we vote him to die, then that just makes the Dark Knight real. So, yeah, sure, kill him.
But Batman, in this story, and, in the original graphic novel, Batman coming back is what also causes all his old supervillains to come back out of it. Yeah. Like, the Joker has been basically just harmless, sitting in a mental institution for, all this time since Batman retired, until he sees on the news Batman's back, and then he goes out and starts mass murdering again. The Joker wakes up, as does Two-Face.
Oh, yeah, Harvey Dent, who's had plastic surgery and has his face fixed, and yet that's not changing the man inside.
Yeah, quite, has his face match, except that when he sees himself in the mirror, he sees himself completely ugly, not completely fixed. There's lots of little neat details like this. There's beautiful artwork from Frank Miller. Now, this animated series certainly changes the look of things, I think, significantly. The line work, at the very least, is completely different.
Yeah, it is.
No, it's still aping it to some extent, the way all of these things try to do, the DC Animated Universe series try to do off their original books, but don't look for too much similarities in those terms. As well, something else is lost in the translation, which is there was lots of subtext in the form of much more news reports than they throw in here of the characters' thoughts in what do you call the boxes on
the captions?
Captions.
Yeah.
I'm really tired. I apologize.
No, it's okay.
What do you call those things that people speak with? Words.
Words.
That's it. A lot of that stuff is missing here, and I felt like, as I was watching this, I kind of felt like I did during the Hunger Games, where I'm like, I'm enjoying this very much, but I'm realizing that anyone seeing this who hasn't read the book is missing huge parts of why this is as interesting.
I thought about Hunger Games also, and I thought about when they did the animated version of New Frontier, and it's just like, man, this is such an incredible, not just incredible, but important story where there's so many elements that are just left out. Yeah, it was hard for me because I'm very close to this work, and it's hard for me to look at it and try to go like, okay, I've never seen this before. I don't know anything about it. How is this affecting me?
I agree with you completely on there. It's like we know this book by heart. I've read it 50 times.
Yeah,
at least.
If I read a page of it, I'm going to sit down and read the whole thing.
Yeah, and it is that good. Yeah. But there's the worst part is, like, I don't mind some, like, sections being taken off for length or what have you.
Sure.
But there's parts that are just changed that shouldn't be. There's one scene in particular that really bothered me where there was a guy on the subway who they keep coming back to in the book, and he basically ends up pushing a guy onto the tracks.
And that guy in the book, he's pretty much Bernard Getz.
Yeah.
Because that was a lot of the inspiration for it. Like, what happens when you have a guy who decides to be vigilante.
And here, his reappearance in the story, and that's not what happens at all in that scene, and like, his character in here is... You're like wondering, why do they keep focusing on that guy? He doesn't really do anything, and he never has anything to contribute. Like, it's just there to remind you that he actually had a point in the original book. And so why did they have him there at all? I don't know. And there's little moments like that. But I think overall, I mean, and keeping in mind, like, that Hunger Games phenomenon, like, I'm filling in a lot of the blanks myself. Overall, I really did enjoy watching this series. I had fun with it. It's a different... I don't want to say a different take in a positive way, but it's watching this story come to life in a way that, obviously can't do on the flat page. And with, I think, on the whole, pretty good voice actors. I know you didn't care for Peter Weller as Batman, but I really enjoyed him in that role.
I mean, the thing is, like, I know so many people who said they think this is the best of the animated adaptations, and God, it pains me to say this, but I just didn't really care for this.
Yeah.
I just, all the way through... like what you talk about with the guy at the subway, that was just a bad decision. But there's so many things about it where it just felt like, wow, this is such a paper doll version of what I read. The colors are too bright. The animation's not that sophisticated. I was like, I've seen them do much better animation on individual episodes. And the voice acting, I mean, I told you how I didn't care for Peter Weller as Batman because his voice is just kind of thin throughout it. But almost all the voice acting I was not digging. I didn't like the new Robin, Carrie Kelly. She was just a little too squeaky and, yeah, Batman, what are we going to do next? Whereas Carrie Kelly, in the book, she's tough. And she has to be tough to hang with him.
Right.
And I just wasn't feeling that. There's scenes in the daytime that would just almost kind of lollipop with the palette that they chose, which was not this book at all. The book, you read it, it's dark, it's gloomy, yeah. And it has to feel that way to get you into it. The thing that killed me, I was like, you know what? If there was ever a time for them to go like, hey, look, we have to get the core guys back. Kevin Conroy for Batman and Mark Hamill for the Joker.
It was this.
This is it. This is that big Twilight. And they have Kevin Conroy in here to play Thomas Wayne, but it's like, yeah, but if you could get him for that,
why not just get him to be Batman?
Yeah, I mean, that would have gave it the weight that it needed, like almost like the end of the Batman animated series,
well,
saying like this is that end.
I do agree with you in the sense that why not? I mean, you got him for that. Why couldn't you get him for the whole thing? It doesn't make any sense not to. I mean, why can't they accept that? That's the guy we all want to see voice Batman in any animated version. I mean, it's not hard to find that out on the internet,
right?
But I had less of a problem with Peter Weller. Like I said, I didn't actually like him in it than I did with Michael Emerson as the Joker. And I love Lost, and I love Michael Emerson, but he had this weird, thin, kind of very laid-back Joker, effeminate, which he is somewhat effeminate in the books, no question.
Sure, oh, absolutely.
In fact, in some of the documentaries that come with this, there's one that's just about the Joker, and they talk about how Miller's version of him was basically David Bowie. That's what he was going for. And that's interesting because I hadn't even thought about that. But yeah, that's totally, he's going for the thin white dude.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, wow, it never would have occurred to me, but that's totally it. And I guess within that context, it makes sense for him to be more effeminate, but I just don't think of the Joker in those terms usually. So it was odd.
It's interesting how with these characters, often a name could pop up and you go, oh yeah, that would be good. On paper, it looks good. And then when they actually do it, it's not quite there. I think Jeremy Sisto has an interesting voice, and yet when he did the voice of Batman, I was like, no, that's not getting it. Bruce Greenwood, I never would have thought of as Batman. I think he's the only guy besides Kevin Conroy who does a good job of it. Michael Emerson, for what he did as Benjamin Linus on Lost, you're like, oh, him as a Joker? Hell yeah. I remember saying that when he was cast. But yeah, to actually watch and listen to it, it's almost like maybe he didn't get it or the way he was directed in it. I don't know what it was, but it just wasn't quite working.
I was very amused that they got Conan O'Brien to play the David Letterman type character in here. That's David Endocrine, but when you watch it originally, it's David Letterman.
Yeah.
When you read the
read the book. And yeah, no, that was actually pretty smart. Now, as much as I didn't like it all that much, like I just found myself either tuning out or just kind of wincing through most of it. I will say what I did actually enjoy a lot was maybe the last 15 minutes when you come to the final battle between Superman and Batman.
It was very well handled.
It was well choreographed. It had a lot of weight. It was impactful. Everything they did from that point on, I thought was awesome.
Overall, I enjoyed this whole thing with the being able to say. It just makes me want to go back and read the book more than it does anything else, which I guess is a good reaction. But, I accept everything you're saying as being true. At the same time, I guess I was never holding it to as high a level of expectation as maybe you were. I was going, I expect this to be fun. I don't expect this to even hit the ballpark of it being as good as the graphic novel was. And I think as an adaptation, it's just fine. I like a lot of these voice actors. I agree with you, especially about the ending. I thought it was really powerful the way they make that all come together. They did a great job with Mark Valley playing Superman, and drawing out that, their primary issues, and the wonderful moment when Batman is like, I just want you to remember the man who beat you. It gives me the chills every fucking time.
It did. I gotta admit that.
But, like I said, I can't disagree with you on any of your criticisms, but at the same time, those criticisms didn't bother me.
Sure.
Now, this disc comes with these 2 discs, because there's part 2 just came out. Part 1 came out a couple months ago. They come up with a variety of extra features. The original one, Part 1, has a great documentary that I believe has already been on one of their DC Animated Universe titles, but I can't remember which one. That's all about Bob Kane, who is a character and a half, to say the least. That guy is bizarre human being. And he lived a pretty bizarre life, and no, he wasn't terribly well liked by absolutely everybody. And this shies away from that completely. I mean, it goes a little as like, yeah, he was a character, and he was kind of full of shit a lot of the time, but everybody still liked him. That's
I guess that is the way you have to clean that up and not talk about like I said, I've heard from so many different avenues about how he just pretty much took credit for what other people did and found a way, kind of like Stan Lee, to come out on top.
But there's also a documentary about the Robin in here and how that affected things and changed things in comics, specifically having a female Robin and how that changed the role of the female in comic books. The second disc has, like I said, an excellent documentary about the Joker. It has a preview look at the upcoming Superman Unbound, which is, and this is exciting, an adaptation of the Brainiac run from Jeff Johns, which is one of the best Superman stories of the decade. Yeah. I mean, it's right up there with Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman of like, this is the must-read Superman stuff. Unfortunately, they're not even going to try and mimic the original artwork, which is a shame because that artist Gary
Frank
is one of the best guys working.
Yeah, he is, but that would break them to do that.
It would.
And what I was going to say about them releasing this as 2 discs, they were shutting down this animation studio while this was being made. Yeah, which could have affected it, because one thing I felt throughout watching it was like, man, it just feels rushed at times, and maybe that's what it was. They're like, guys, you ain't got a lot of time. How soon can you get this done?
Well, maybe that has something to do with why there aren't as big names in a lot of these roles as you would expect.
Yeah.
But either way, I think, I'm going to give it, if we're going to go to a spill rating, I'm actually going to give it a low full price for me.
Oh. I can't go there. The best I can do is a low matinee.
Well, that's not so bad after all.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, thank you, Leon, so much for coming on. I appreciate it. There's a way of being able to talk about this that I feel like I kind of had to have you.
Oh, sure. Hey, man. Thanks for inviting me on.
You act like a criminal.
We are criminals. We always have been.
Look, one of these days, someone with authority is going to tell me to come stop you. And when that happens...
I hereby issue a warrant for the Batman's arrest.
When that happens, may the best man win.